giving a speech called Politically Correct Diseases, and here's what he wrote. Why do some diseases require a disproportionate view of research funding? Here to answer that question is Ken Smith with Politically Correct Diseases. Politically Correct Diseases, Ken Smith.
Thank you, Madam Toastmaster, fellow Toastmasters, and all the guests that we failed to invite. Follow the money is one aspect of why some diseases are disproportionately funded over others. And of course, political correctness is another. I'm going to read to you for a moment from The Political Economy of Publicly Funded Biomedical Research. That was a mouthful. This was put out by New York University in 2011. I'll just read the beginning of the abstract, which talks about what the 38-page report is going to cover. How do the scientific community, politicians, and special interest groups influence the allocation of publicly funded research? We investigate this question by analyzing novel data on the lobbying expenditures of disease interest groups, congressional earmarks, and funding by the National Institutes of Health, NIH, for 955 rare diseases during the 1998 to 2008 period. We show that congressional earmarking for the rare diseases is responsive to the lobbying expenditure of interest groups associated with the diseases, but not to our measure of scientific opportunity and disease burden. NIH funding for the diseases is not responsive to earmarking overall, but only to earmarking associated with lobbying expenditures. An example in the non-medical area of this, just to give you a sense of the political correctness of research, would be the man-made global warming idea. What is the scientific evidence for man-made global warming? Anyone know?
Carbon dioxide.
There's always been carbon dioxide. What is the evidence that the carbon dioxide that man puts out will raise the temperature of the Earth? James?
Because it's been really warm this week.
Yeah, most people ask in spring if there's global warming, say, yeah, it's warmer now.
Mm-hmm.
But that's not
Yeah.
the quote evidence. The evidence is a computer model that predicts that it will be. Just to give you an understanding of computer modeling, I wrote a computer model years ago when I had a publishing company publishing for the multi-level marketing industry. People would send me their marketing plan, as it was called, and ask me what the outcome would be if they put that plan into effect. And I wrote a computer program to predict. But what I realized after writing it was all based on my assumptions, my beliefs. If you program a computer to say 2 plus 2 is 5, and then put in 2 plus 2, it'll say 5. The model for global warming is exactly like that. It was created by people who believe that humans are influenced or will influence the temperature of the Earth, and they refuse to let anyone see the source code. The source code is the actual computer language that was based on the assumptions they put in. So that's the only, quote, scientific evidence, is a computer model that predicts that it will. It's all based on that. But there's a lot of funding that goes to how we can reduce carbon dioxide because of this, versus funding, there's no funding basically available to anyone who would, like climatologists who say, hey, you know, the Earth has always gone through warm and cold cycles. Remember the Ice Age, you know?
Yeah.
So there's no funding for that side, and that's due to the lobbying as well as the ridicule that people get if they're called flat earthers, if they don't subscribe to this new religion. And I call it a religion because it's not challengeable. You're not allowed to really question whether or not it's true. But let's do it now on diseases. Let's focus on those. Let's talk first about heart disease. Heart disease is something that affects a majority of all deaths, or 20, I'm sorry, not a majority, the biggest chunk of all deaths for both men and women. 2.4 million people die in the US every year. 720,000 of them have a heart attack, and of those, 600,000 die. That's 1 in 4 deaths. A little more than half of them are men, a little under half of them are women, but it is the leading cause of death for both men and women. Heart disease gets $1.2 billion in research funds, and that's about $2,000 research funding for each death. Let's talk about AIDS for a minute, a politically correct disease. There are 1.1 million people in the US who have HIV. In 2010, 529 people died with AIDS. These are people who have been diagnosed with AIDS, but they're the number of people who died. AIDS doesn't kill anyone. They may have died in a car wreck, they may have died some other way. Autoimmune disease research gets $821 million, according to the National Institute of Health, and that's almost 53,000 per AIDS death. Compare that again to the 2,000 per death that heart disease gets. That's 26.5 times as much. Why do people with AIDS warrant so much more funding than all the rest of the people who are going to die? Let's look at breast cancer. 1 in 8 women will get breast cancer in their lifetime, or will be diagnosed with it. In 2011, 2 million, a big number, of women in the US were living with breast cancer, and there were 22.2 deaths per 100,000. That's 644 deaths from breast cancer each year. Breast cancer funding is $657 million. That's over $1 million of research per death. And there's the chart showing, you can't even see heart disease on that chart compared to AIDS and breast cancer. Why, with so few people who actually die of breast cancer, do they get so many times the funding compared to the majority, what the majority of deaths will be, or the biggest chunk of deaths will come from, which is the heart disease, heart-related diseases. This is a combination of it's politically correct and lobbying. And I'm way over time.
Wait, no. That was really good.
It's good. This is a good speech. You
Yeah.
should have timed
keep
it
going.
longer.
Well, that's
longer.
the
Yeah.
end of it.
Okay.
Maybe you
I
need
just
to
breeze through the numbers.
Any
Okay.
questions?
All right.
Oh, you
Yeah.
want
That's it.
questions?
question.
No.
Okay, we're already over time. Go ahead.
So I was just curious.